Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us today and for the opportunity to present. This is also my first session this year. I'm excited about it and about this topic. So yeah, one of the reasons why I've picked headless for the session is basically most of my time, like the second half of last year, I've worked with many clients working on creating a tech strategy for their solution. So making sure that their current tech stack and the future state of it would fit with everything that we know about Sitecore. And headless has been something constant within these discussions. Granted that it has not been something that we wanted to do like next year or like in a year and a half, but like within their 3 to 5 year plan, it's definitely something that everyone has about it, something that everyone is looking forward to it. So I'm hoping by the end of the session to focus on mainly 3 things. Number one, to make a distinction between what is headless CMS and a headless implementation or application like we had with XP and JSS. For developers and for content authors to understand how they can work with Content Hub 1, get introduced to how easy it is to add to and work with. And finally, and this is the main important one, is when to recommend Content Hub 1, right? Because it's nice that we have options now. It's good that Sitecore came up with all of these options, but at the same time, we need to make sure we go and use this because it's an option, not an alternative to what we have. So this is my target for today's session. And I think, let's see, by now, many of you have seen this before, right? So let's put XP and XM on the side and look just through the SaaS products that Sitecore came up with over the past couple of years. And we have almost 10 mature products. And one of the main things that customers look at when they select a product for Sitecore is engagement. So they look into interaction of their customers and visitors with their website. They look into how we can create analytics and reporting on top of that. And in the past, like I worked extensively with some of my clients on moving these kind of analytics into Sitecore. So they would be working with multiple different third-party systems like Google Big Data and other systems, and they collect actively lots of interaction, lots of information about their visitors. And one of them, their main goal has always been to provide a connected customer journey. So if someone has been interested in product 1 when they visited the Facebook page, when they come to the website, they were looking for a day 1 kind of personalization, right? Because the way Sitecore does personalization, for example, is it monitor and track your behavior and interaction with the website after the first visit, and then it starts recommendation. But everyone was looking, no, I want them, when they visit the website, I can know who they are, and I can do personalization, use that previous knowledge. And this is where we used to look into XDB as the source of truth. We move everything into Sitecore, we do lots of customization and all of that. So you can imagine the amount of overhead and customization has been put in these solutions. But today, if a client comes to you and asks you about, okay, I want to store this kind of information, I might not be ready today to do all of that, personalization, A/B testing, whatever, but in the future, it's on my plan. Now I have another option, right? This is where you start to think about, okay, is XDB the right fit for me? Or should I start recommending CDB? Because CDB allows you to do all of that out of the box. It gives you all the connectors to do it. And then it gives you 365 customer profile. You have reports out of the box. You can do all of that without the overhead of customizing XDB. So looking into the new SaaS offering from Sitecore, always think about it as multiple options that we have now. It's not an alternative. Even if it seems like a comprehensive thing to do, like customizing XDB. If XDB is the right fit, if XDB is the right fit, then that's the right thing to do. Same thing when we look into the commerce cloud, right? We have now Order Cloud and we have Discover as an AI-based search for our products. We have existing solutions, we have new ones. Now, the biggest or the widest range of recently invested efforts from Sitecore was definitely the content in the cloud, because content continue to be the core of the Sitecore offering. We've all heard about XM Cloud. I'm pretty sure many of you have already joined multiple sessions or maybe touched with other clients on one or two implementations. So XM Cloud has started to get some hype, and many of us has already experimented, at least seeing how that has been being played out. Content Hub 1, so XM Cloud is a Sitecore native CMS, so that means that it has been built as a SaaS product from the get-go. So it has not been like we've migrated the XP into the cloud and we wrapped up the product around this. So there has been no migration. Rather, the entire build happened as a SaaS product. Now, Content Hub 1 gives you like XM Cloud, some sort of hybrid or semi-headless experience similar to what we get with XP and GSS. Now, we're still talking about your application, right? Your end customer experience being headless. But we never worked with Sitecore as a headless product, a true headless product, until Content Hub 1 has been released sometime and made public back in November. So Content Hub 1 is considered the first headless CMS provided by Sitecore. And we're going to talk about the history and how did we come into this and why many are looking into this as a viable option and all of that. And definitely they have released Search, which is the API-based counterpart of Discover, but like based on content. Then we have Content Hub operations in them that also has been released on top of Content Hub 1. Now, when you think about all of these products and where does it fit within the digital experience from a tech perspective, definitely a constant, again, think about it not only within a Sitecore perspective, but also within the entire other products, like where tech is now today. Everyone is talking about hybrid or headless content as a service, right? XP and let's say Contentful or now Content Hub 1, right? Everyone is looking into making the experience of orchestrating content in separation of page orchestration. So what does that mean? When a content author gets to Sitecore and they try authoring, they always have the option of seeing how the page is going to look like in the experience editor. Right? So that creates some sort of dependency on the dev team to put all of that effort in place. So when content authors start working on that, they see something in place. Same thing with SXA, right? Because SXA, when we look at it, it's always been an option for those who want to not wait on the front-end team and the team until they finish. They can have that canvas and build components, but not all content author teams are tech savvy to build that themselves. So there has been a need where they can go into a simple solution like they did with WordPress and these other CMSs, but on an enterprise level and do all of that. And the way we consume this kind of content has always been using API. So look into the direction of where, again, all the tech is heading. Everyone is talking about APIs, and we're no longer talking about API from a third-party API or a service, right? Because we typically, when we work with API outside the MVC kind of a paradigm, it's always been when we integrate to a service where we're gonna do get with it, for example, right? And we consume that in a JSON format, or we might use the GraphQL to pull information. Now, this kind of architectural design is now been tied back to your CMS, your TXP implementation. And this is why we've been hearing about all of these composable DXP discussions over the past couple of years, and the main reason is that there's lots of good products and solutions out there, and we're no longer only interested in a single solution that fits all, right? This is how XP works. This is how big platform works. This is how Oracle and Adobe used to be, right? You buy that suite and you have everything that you can think of inside it. But if you need a feature that's not in that product and it's somewhere else, you would need to build custom integration to do that. Now the shift has been made towards making sure that my system is able to connect easily and some sort of out of the box to any other product that I throw it their way. And this has to be using stuff like APIs and SDKs and that kind of integration. Jamstack architecture. This is also something that we have been hearing about in the past 4 to 5 years, right? All the move into having your head, which is your application, separate from your backend, from your content. So basically, to enhance performance, to improve the efficiencies and maintenance of these things, and to quickly go to market. And we say go to market, it's basically releasing your website publicly, right? There has been a shift towards adapting like a static site generation in terms of your HTML. So you recombine all of your HTML, right? You store it in a CDN for caching and use JavaScript calls to connect to these backend system and fetch the content, and use something like Vercel or Netlify to make it available publicly. So think about these products that we've just talked about within this architecture. So everything comes together in terms of, okay, in general, where the head of the entire product ecosystem are heading. And we're still looking into providing multi-experiences in terms of personalization and everything and all of that. But now we add an element to it, which is being headless. Being headless, it means as we used to deliver personalization in many of these activities based on server-side operations, right? There would be something doing the tracking, doing the aggregation, and then reporting and all of that. Now this needs to be moved for your client, for your browser. It has to be delivered in a more of a client-side processing. So another thing to think about when we talk about headless within all of that is how your infrastructure, how your architecture and implementation, and even your knowledge is shifting towards that. And obviously all of this happening within a cloud infrastructure. So we're talking about all of these products being cloud native. So it's already been provided as managed service by vendors, right? So it's a managed service by Sitecore. And you can see this also when they're selling XP, right? The bushes, we sell this as a managed service by Sitecore. So Sitecore does all of the provisioning of the infrastructure and all of that. They're responsible for it, trying to take away some of the overhead from clients to handle all of that by themselves. Now, but all of these digital experiences towards a common architecture, this is what we hear. Sorry, and if you look like on LinkedIn and you're following on Twitter and all that, there's also hype around the MACH architecture. So what is that? So MACH architecture stands for microservices, APIs, cloud native, headless. So how does this fit within our shift towards Content Hub 1 and our Sitecore implementations? Let's take microservices. The idea behind microservices is to ship lightweight services quickly to the cloud. So let's take your commerce website. You have areas for customer loyalty. You have your ordering experience. You have your checkout experience. The idea is that you break down these business units into a standalone shippable services that can be easily deployed. Sorry, one second. can be consumed in a way that can be easily supported by API. Let's take API first approach into the equation. Now we work with the client who has our commerce system is built on top of Oracle, and we're moving away from Oracle into another new system. The dilemma that we're having today is the commerce team. So we have a commerce team, and the commerce team finished all their upgrades and all the switch to the new system, and they're ready to test new UAT. But the website team is still not ready to do that. So we are no longer able to deploy anything to production because our UAT has to be ready to integrate with a system that is newer than that. So if we're going to go to production, we no longer have these endpoints that must to the old system. So think about microservices as your application gateway. And we have two endpoints, an endpoint that maps to the old Oracle system and an endpoint that's mapped to the new system. And all you need is in your application, in your API gateway is to manage. In UAT, I'm gonna call the endpoint for the new system. In production, I'm gonna call the API for the new, for the Oracle system. So the call and the signature and the API call is still the same. The underlying implementation changes based on whatever service I'm calling. Same thing if I'm planning to roll out this new feature based on market. So if I want to release first to the US, I can just use the application gateway to detect which country I'm at. Then the API management would select which endpoint to trigger, and that's about it. You don't have to worry about writing code that's going to do the detection or adding a flags to turn on and off these features. Everything is done on an infrastructure level, and these things are hosted in the cloud. So let's take the cloud into the equation now. So you don't have to worry about writing a single line of code or do a deployment to do this change. Everything is done before an initial request is done to your application. And finally, the headless. The headless element comes into play because, again, everyone now wants to be able to support an API kind of an approach, play around with your application with whatever kind of language you have. Could be Next.js, could be Java, could be React, whatever technology your team knows and familiar with should be enough to work with whatever backend you're interacting with that. As a developer, you don't have to learn like a new language and a new programming language every time you switch to something different because the site has to be built in this language and that. No, your team, if they're just familiar with React, they don't have to change to Next.js. That knowledge is separate from implementing Sitecore. So this headless implementation comes in what we call Content Hub 1. So let's go back and make a quick comparison with JSS. So JSS is the Sitecore first attempt to go the headless route. It allows you to create your application, whatever language you want, right? It's hosted on either on your CD, right? Or on a reverse proxy like Node server. And your component or your application will call a GraphQL APIs, whatever APIs is needed. That's mapped either to your CD or to your CM, right? So we still have that kind of a tightly coupled integration between your application and your website. Same thing as a content author. I still can orchestrate pages by going to the experience editor and add the JSS rendering component. If it's not implemented, you get that orange display in the experience editor, right? But once that integration happens, they're able to test on the fly as they author stuff, how the component looks like. Some of the disadvantages to this approach, number one, when JSS has been introduced back in 9.2 and been matured like in 9.3, I believe, it came pretty much tightly coupled with SXA. And if you look into JSS now 10.3, they did a separate of this. So now you have a headless SXA, you have headless JSS, and you have a headless services that does this work, right? So even if you want to do an upgrade now from 9.3 to 10.3, there's some work needs to be done because the underlying thing has changed. Number two, when many clients started that work, and because it was new, there's two approaches to implement a JSS application. One of them is to go Sitecore first or a backend first. And those who were in favor of being more lenient on the front-end team to lead the process went backend first. And the mentality of a backend developer who doesn't know Sitecore doesn't necessarily fit well within how you would expect a page or a component to be built in Sitecore. The way these components translated back to Sitecore has not been that smooth. I've worked with the client who did that one, and one of the recommendations after the audit is just like this way. It's been very bad experience for the content authors. So you can still see a dependency on your front team, still a dependency on your development team. While once you go into a headless CMS, number one, we're separating the UI from the content. So there is no longer dependency. A content author, you need to go into content tab 1, start writing content or creating content. It doesn't need anyone to see how that looks like. So they no longer can see how it's gonna show on a page. That means your front-end team can just work in isolation. There's no need for them to wait on how the content author's gonna do the content or when. Once we agreed on our contract or on our model, right, we are able to do this mapping between the CMS backend and your front-end. So this is like the content hub dashboard, or as it's called, the home screen. It's just pretty much very neat, clean interface, and it shows you exactly the things that you can do. I'm going to talk about each one. Modeling your content, so it's about creating content models, creating your content, which is the authoring, uploading media, because at the end of the day, as an author, either adding content or media, and a setting part. Since we're talking about headless, so everything is built on top of an API, so there's a setting section where you need to build your API keys for consumption, and that's managed by the dev team. At the section, you can see we have a documentation, so quick links to Sitecore documentation regarding each functionality you can get out of this, and then you can create board tickets directly on this version of your content hub with these issues. So once this is provided to you as a side product, it means all the overhead of the upgrades, all of the overhead of the updates, changes, if something you break is on Sitecore and not on you. So this is one of the reasons why one would think about these things, especially if you're talking about something that's small that you will roll out quickly and you don't want to put that much of investment into it. And we're going to talk more about that. Now, who are the stakeholders or the users of Content Hub 1? Again, as we work with a new SaaS product from Sitecore, there's always a new terminology and new things to talk about. So now we're talking about what's called content modeler. So a content modeler are those who are responsible for building and maintaining a content model. It's basically someone who's responsible about creating your templates, right? Content author are the ones who are responsible for creating content and publishing that. And then finally, developers are the one who's responsible for integrating these APIs, because an API needs to be called to the headless CMS, and an API needs to deliver that to your application. So these different APIs, whether it's an HTTP or a GraphQL, has to be managed by the dev team. So a dev can handle all of that, granted that they would understand the steps of creating models and all of that. And at the same time, it could be two separate roles, whatever works customers. All right, now how it's the architecture for this Content Hub one. Again, always just keep the discussion that we talked about MACH and the Jamstack into your mind, because this is how most of like modern products are being built. So number one is a CDN, and a CDN is responsible for delivering static site generated of your HTML. It's responsible for caching. It's responsible for making sure that you are delivering a very speedy and high performance pages and websites. So there should be a CDN. Now we have two elements, which is number 2 and 3, the delivery edge and the media delivery. So these kind of components are the ones responsible for the communication with the Content Hub CMS, Content Hub 1 CMS. So opposed to what we know with JSS, again, I said JSS, this could be a .NET Core, depends on whatever you have implemented, right? But with traditional hybrid Sitecore XP, we're still connecting through CD, right? Because your JSS could be on the CD directly or on a reverse proxy. When Content Hub 1, that layer of CD is no longer there. Our content delivery is broken into two things, the experience edge and the media delivery. And the delivery edge is responsible for giving you the content, right, back from your CMS using GraphQL APIs, and the median is to scale and deliver your assets to the CDN. Then we have our Content Hub 1, and we have a set of APIs, could be a GraphQL API or an open API application that handles the different operation of maintaining and creating content and delivering that in Content Hub 1. So as you will see from an architecture perspective, there's going to be a clear separation between the two. So your headless implementation as CMS, again, when we talk about headless CMS, it's been shifted to your backend or a CMS opposed to what we know now as headless application. So your headless application is here, just cares about getting content, displaying content. A headless CMS is responsible for content creation and publishing to that experience edge, which is called here content delivery. So it's not CD and the conventional way we know CDs, but rather a cloud-based APIs that manage the delivery of GraphQL and content and all of that. Now, from the home screen of Content Hub, we've talked about three main things. Content modeling. So basically, it allows a business user or whatever stakeholder is responsible for that to create the structure for the content. So building a block similar to what we call it as a template in traditional XP, it's called a content type in Content Hub 1. So it's, again, same concept, similar to templates, but it's more refined around the idea if you have a functionality, if you have a piece of category to be delivered, build that as a content type. So if I'm building and use or a blog post, right? Traditionally, we would create a news page. We inherit from an interface that has all of these fields on a page level rather than data source. So a content type, your content modelers need to be able to identify this. And this is why a previous slide mentioned that this type of CMS would need more tech-savvy creators, because they need to understand how they can group these into units. Content type yields, this is where they decide, I'm going to use an integer for this one, I'm going to use a string, I'm going to use a date. So they can do all of that, and they should be able to build relations between all of that. Because the entire idea behind having this lightweight, agile, headless CMS is to create quick, very reusable, maintainable, and efficient content to be consumed quickly. So when they build these content types, they need to be able to understand the concept of referencing, or what we call traditional like inheritance and all of that. How can they build content types that can be also referenced from other types to build more and more mature content models? Now, in order to do that, it goes through a design principle. So the design principle in this case is around 5 things. Content use. So what kind or what type of content is needed to be built and how it will be used? Is it going to be changed based on specific criteria, or it's just like a regular change? If your content authors would create, news articles or whatever with a certain structure, so it has to have a content structure, and how much that can be used and reused with others. So content use is an important concept when designing this content model. Content reuse fits into that as well by making sure which pieces of information can be reused and used with other content types. Content validation, and this is important because, for example, for my current website, we use a headless CMS, and when if I want to go and create something, I just do that in UAT production directly, right? Because I don't have like a local environment to do it, and everything is in the cloud. And sorry for that. And if I'm building it from scratch, I want to be able, because I'm only adding content. Again, remember, this is a separation between the UI and content. You don't see anything until it's published. So it's oftentimes would I be adding content and all of that, and I only have the chance to validate it once it's published, once it's available on UAT or production. So I'm late in the game until I see how that's going to look like. So being able to define and understand what kind of validation is needed, what kind of limitation in terms of like character length and all that is really important for these content creators to understand, or content modelers. Ease of creation, how easy content author just create a blog post and publish it and make it available, and making sure that all of that is built around the customer journey. Because content or a headless CMS is a CMS that's built with a content first strategy. So if you watch any of my past sessions, I would always focus on having your content strategy built from day one. And this follows the same concept, because your content teams can start creating from day one, even before sprint 0, right? Even before your developers start spinning up their local environment to do any of the work, content author can just go and create all of that. So they need to understand what kind of customer journey gonna end up serving for this website, and they build accordingly all of these content models. Now, as you can see, similar to the Content Hub one homepage, it's pretty much clean. Everything that you need is just out there and easy to use. So content types, I list all the content types that have been created and updated by one. And by clicking on Add type, you get a name. So if I want to create an event, it allows you to start looking into creating fields. You get quickly on the side the details of this content type that you're creating. And once you click on creating a type, you can give it a name and an inscription. And the ID piece is the one that's going to be used by your front-end team when they access the fields from the graphical APIs. And that part, once your changes are saved, you can define if it's required or not. You have a JSON overview of how this is going to be delivered as part of your GraphQL. And then you can do other operations. You can order your fields in the content tab. You can edit, you can delete, and you can do all of that. Content authoring process is pretty much simple. It's business as usual as we know it. It's content authors going into the CMS, populating content in media. The content part is similar. You can search for any content you want. You can filter by type, and then you start authoring process. You fill all information with the field or the content type fields that you have defined. It gives you clearly the limitation that you have defined on a field level, and then once everything is available, they can be published to be consumed. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And finally, your media. Same concept, upload media, upload your assets, and now it's available to your media management layer. Now, the content delivery part, as mentioned before, again, your content delivery now is your delivery edge and media management system. We don't have an actual CD, and while someone is doing the authoring, it has to be published and made available on the delivery edge in order to be seen by your application, or let's say by any other system. For example, if there's a kiosk, if there's a billboard that's reading this information out of your CMS, it has to be made available on the delivery edge, because that's where all the content is going to be added. And it goes through the normal workflow. So the draft would be for newly created content or unpublished one. Published is when something has been made available on the content on the delivery edge. Changed if you did some changes and they're not yet published, and if a content state is published, changed, it means the version that you currently have on your delivery edge is not the latest one. You need to do the publish in order to see all of that. So from a developer perspective, the APIs that can be worked and used within a Content Hub 1 is internal, right? So Content Hub 1 would have to communicate and has the headless CMS capabilities to create and publish all of these content. And once it's published through API, it's made available here. So your application and your system will only interact with this layer. So through HTTPS calls, you can request either the CDN or the experience edge to get to your GraphQL. There's no direct link between your application and the CMS. Each one of them just work separately. There's no CD, there's no layer in between. It's directly like you have a CM and a reverse proxy. And we're talking APIs. That means we will have a section for API key management. So in the settings, you should be able to create the APIs. It gives you two types for delivery and review. And the difference between them is that the delivery API can be used on the experience edge. So that means that I need to plug in my. So it means that the content is published and available for consumption. The delivery API is only available if you're using more of like your CSS or JavaScript SDK, and we have other options for the .NET implementation, but it's using other APIs. So for media management, we're using a media mode rather than a media delivery, because the .NET is responsible for the content management type of APIs, and goes to the experience edge that deals with that, and a preview API allows you to see unpublished content. So the APIs that are available in the experience edge are GraphQL, so they are purely GraphQL and can give you unpublished and published content. While the one available in content management, they are native open API services that has been implemented with the Swagger in it, so you can go and look into the operations that you can do to upload and update content, or do all of these activities. There's a CLI that allows you to do all of that using content creation and management using a CLI. It uses serialization as well, so it helps us make sure that we serialize everything to the Git. And finally, it allows us to create packages that we can move from one environment to the other and help us with deployment. JavaScript with .NET SDK, as we've seen, and the diagram, again, it allows you to give you other options of how you want to have your application built. So you're not bound by a specific language, you don't have any restriction. Again, you can build the entire application on Ruby on Rails and use Sitecore as like Content Hub 1 as your CMS without the need to use Sitecore coupled APIs to do all of that. Now, why would we go with the Content Hub 1? For mainly two reasons. Number one, for the business, as we've spoken previously, it gives the content authors and the business team to build all their work in isolation. If they want to create a campaign pages, they do not have to wait on your dev team until they build all of that and make it available. They can just go ahead and submit, and your front-end team just can take care of creating these basically quick implementation for it. So it's quick delivery, quick time to market, and your performance is very quick. And from a technical perspective, you don't have overhead of maintaining your entire implementation. It's more on Sitecore now to do that. It helps you focus on the heavy functionality like the integration part, or on integrating with other systems, and like let's say the microservices part of it, instead of just working and to learn every single thing that's new with the Sitecore. It's new tech stack, so it's something nice to have. And the final question is, having these options, again, look about these as different options rather than alternatives. So each one of those is not an alternative for the other, but it's an option based on your needs and your capabilities, both from a client perspective and a dev team. So XM XP is still going to be there. It's still hugely used, and it's better suited for certain industries and locations, especially that has a huge integration. And it's big in nature. When you have multi-brands, when you have multi-tenants and all of that, XM XP is still good to go. XM Cloud has now been recommended as the first option for someone new to Sitecore, but still it's more appealing if you want to look into Sitecore as only a single element in your ecosystem. So as an ecosystem, I could have an integration with Adobe, an integration with Oracle, an integration with Markero, and Sitecore is just a part of that. It can handle certain aspects of it, and it's on the cloud. And Content Hub 1, again, it's more of projects that you need to spend something really quick and cheap, because the cost is pretty much on the low side, and all of these CMSs or offerings, and it helps content author to deliver something really quick. So a campaign landing page, a small microsite, something like that can be done really quickly, could be your get to go. So the moral of this is, at the end of the day, you now understand how Sitecore ended up having all of these different options, because the market demand us to have multiple options that works in a certain way, where the technology is heading. So you as a backend developer or as a front-end developer, you know where your skill set will be needed the most. And again, you do not necessarily have to become a front-end developer. You need to understand where your capability will work best as you push towards MACH architecture, for example, or through Jamstack implementation and all of that. And finally, the experience itself is easy, it's counterintuitive, and doesn't have a training. Something once you have access to it, you can pull things quickly and without much investment or training. And yeah, that's about it.